Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on our AssureHawk automated functional specification generation platform. What we are going to see in this webinar is a short presentation which provides the background or the context of challenges faced by end-using institutions using T24, followed by the output documents which gets generated out of the platform, namely the functional specification and the parameter documentation. And we would revert back to the presentation which will give the steps that we go through in the platform in order to automate these generations, and then we would have a short walkthrough of the platform itself, where you would see a live generation of these documentation. Now, typically, if one looks at the end-using institutions, they would have created functional specification document when they had first migrated into a new solution or when they have been through a major transformation. When we say specification, conventionally many people have associated that with the functional specification document, but typically in a migration or a transformation context, most institutions would have also created either a system documentation which is used by the IT team and a user manual which is used by their operations team. In our context, when we refer as specifications, we refer all these three documents together. Now, most of the functional specification documents would carry the specifications relating to a release, which means if an end-using institution has over the last 4 years had 4 or 5 releases in a year, 20 such documentation needs to be collated to provide the system under production at this point in time. There is a challenge with regard to creating or updating these specifications, which stems from the fact that you require plural set of skills and multiple people to be engaged in order to do them. One, it would require knowledge of T24 across the various modules. Second, it would require somebody who knows those business processes relating to the various business lines the bank is engaged in. And the third, with regard to writing those specifications document, and each one of those specifications document require a different set of skills, especially as regards functional specification or the system manual or the user manual is concerned. Similarly, there is a challenge with regard to finding one or a group of people who would know all the modules of T24 and also know the technical components of that platform completely. Given that these are the challenges which are faced, and on an ongoing basis, all of them, whether it is a business analyst or the IT team or the users, undergo a lot of challenges with regard to meeting their issues arising out of the normal operations. Take the IT team. In typical situations, the transformation program would have been executed by an independent group and handed it over to the IT team of the bank. Since the specifications themselves are not complete, the handing over would not be very complete. With the result, the IT team faces challenges not knowing the technical components and the schema of T24, as well as the impact of the various enhancements which has been carried out by the bank. They learn it the hard way. You would see in those documents that we are generating, it would have all the components to locate a problem. The moment those are available, the IT team would be able to solve them without much of difficulty. Typically, the operations people, when they have to train, it is very difficult to get a complete documentation on the system in production because, as stated earlier, the functional specification documents which are release specific have to be collated together to provide the system under production. and most of the business rules are set outside those specifications, and therefore they are not available in a similar collated fashion for the users to refer to. Given these challenges, we thought that we would create a platform which, from a configured instance of T24, would go to generate these specifications documents simultaneously and in an automated fashion, involving very minimal touch point times with both the business as well as the IT users. Now we will go down to the documents to see how they are and what they carry. This is a functional specification document for a retail lending, consumer loans. And if you look at the contents, you will have this overview section which is completely editable by the end-using institution. They could provide their own customized overview. The second component is the business rules, where these are carried in plain simple English. To the left of it, you would have what that rule refers to, and to the right you would have the values relating to those rules. Then you would have their application components, which are extremely valuable to a business analyst but not so much to the business user, which tells you what is the main application, what is the version used, as well as what are the parameters and the lookup tables which are impacted in that particular entry screen. Then you would have the field properties relating to whether it is a mandatory field or a system computed field or a hidden field or field with fixed options or read-only fields. The field with fixed options gives you all those drop-down values which are carried at the application level. Then you would have the T24 version, which is the truncated portion of that application which has been configured for that particular client. Now we will go to the parameter document, which is essentially used by the IT team in order to resolve issues concerning the operations of T24. This is generated at the business group level and therefore carries all that applications, versions, and the entry screen. The entry screens are the ones as it appears in your configured T24 instance. The version is the one which has been configured for you, and the application is the one which is provided in the T24. In many instances, people configure a version which is a much truncated portion of the application functionality, and therefore they are largely familiar with the version but not what the application provides. This enables somebody to have a look at that application and see which are the enhancements which could be done using the configuration already available in T24 rather than doing it in a customized fashion. Then you would have the entry screen, which are all the parameters which are impacting the various screens. At this point of time, we had configured for the consumer loans others for which we generated the functional specification documents, and therefore you would see those parameters, ld.transaction type condition available for that, and there is a single parameter record. There could be multiple parameter records relating to this parameter, in which case all those record details will be available at this place. Now it will also give you which are all the routines which are there as part of that. Then you would have for the particular parameter what are all the fields and what are the values carried in that particular parameter record. Above you saw that LD transaction type condition had a parameter record 21073, and therefore here you would have the values relating to those parameter record. This enables some of these fields are not the ones which impacts the business rules, and therefore they are not translated into that business rules. For example, you have the company code, you have the base date. These are not, it is for the system setup part and it is not for business rule purposes, and therefore they don't figure in the business rule. Now you would find that interest rate is 15, income is 7,500, here, and that you would find it in the functional specification document. I'm going to take you to the functional specification document to show where it figures. If you look at income of the borrower should be equal to 7,500 has been translated from 21 this parameter record where you show the income as 7,500. Similarly, each one of those business rules had been configured from this parameter record, and therefore the functional specification gets generated both with the rule as well as with those values. It also gives you, like in the case of a functional specification document, the looked up applications as well as the field properties, whether it be mandatory, systems computed, hidden fields, or field with fixed options. It will also give you the version details like how it is in the functional specification document. In addition, it will give you the linked T24 versions. If you have been using ArcIB and have integrated into your channels, whether it is internet or mobile, it will tell you which are all the versions which are associated with that, and it will also tell you during the process of that internet transactions what it goes through in terms of your next version and the confirmed version. The last section gives you the routines and by the various classes, whether it is relating to the ID, the input, authorization, record, and the last two sections relates to what is gone through in T24, that is before unauthorized write routine as well as after unauthorized write routines. If you really look at, in order for an IT team, it would have all the values, whether it be parameters, whether it is the application, whether it is a parameter record, whether it is a routine. All of those components are available in order for them to locate a problem where it is stemming from. It could either come from a parameter or its values. It could come from a lookup table or its values. It could come from a routine, and therefore all those elements are available offline without having to resort to T24 itself. Therefore, it would enable them to locate an issue and then go to resolve them. Now I will go back to the presentation to take you through the steps we run in our platform in order to generate this. AssureHawk has been configured as a non-vertical, vertical agnostic platform, and therefore at the core of it you have that engine which is capable of being configured for multiple verticals. At this point of time we have configured for banking, and we are also working on a cards model for the credit card platform. It can also be configured for other vertical. And within banking, it has a solution model on top of the vertical or the domain component. At this time we have configured for Temenos T24. We could similarly configure it for iFlex as well as for Finacle or other core solutions. And top of it is the client model. The solution model that we have here is a release agnostic model, which is there in order to facilitate the capture as well as incorporation of the client model. The client model becomes the base as far as the client is concerned, and therefore all the elements which they go to see will be similar to what they would have seen in their own context. Now the domain or the banking model has the various banking groups identified, whether it be personal banking, the business banking, treasury operations, or the wealth management part. Similarly, certain components which are aligned to that, which are horizontal, have also been incorporated, whether it be the customer or it be the trade services component. Similarly, the systems part, which runs horizontally, has been classified into the services management group. What we mean by attributes is that it is the business friendly name given for fields so that the users can relate to them in a easy manner. Most of the fields will carry abbreviations or other formats which is not easily understandable by the business user, and therefore in the release agnostic model, wherever we find those fields existing in the version, we have classified them into attributes. Business rules, it has two sets of business rules which have been factored into that model. One are system or the solution related rules, which most of the solutions have in terms of either validations or for the purposes of completeness. And the second is the typical business rules which are made by the end users. What we mean by classification is the set of enrichments that we do in order to facilitate both test design as well as test execution. The classifications are of three categories. One is by the business aspect, which identifies the criticality from the perspective of financial, regulatory, or from customer service standpoint of view, as well as in terms of their impact, high, medium, or low. The second is a system aspects, which identifies whether it is an enhancement or a new functionality which has been added, and it also identifies which part of it is impacted either by the online or batch processing, as well as the source of those, whether it is intermodule or inter-application, and if so, which is the application which impacts it. The third aspect is the nature aspect, which has all the field properties. You would have seen those field properties in the functional specification documents, whether it be types of fields, whether it is mandatory, and in terms of field length and attributes relating to that. Now, when we come into the solution model, we have a release agnostic T24 model built into the platform, to which we have done the enrichments in terms of attributes, business rules, classifications in place. What we have essentially done in the business rules is identify the parameters which would impact the various entry screens and have them attached to that in order that it can automatically generate the specifications. And if there are custom parameters, we would similarly attach them to the appropriate entry screens, and therefore it can go to configure the specifications. In the client model, we have created a routine which we would run in the runtime environment of your T24, which would extract your menu structure, your application, the version, and the parameter record. And once it does that, what we would do is, from our solution model, we would inherit all those enrichments which we have and onto the client model. Irrespective of whether you use which of the features provided in T24, whether it be AA or AAA or the process workflow or the parameter, we would have an ability to capture it from your system. And once we do that, we would inherit the enrichments which we carry in our solution model onto the client model, and therefore the client model is having those enrichments in place. For the custom development which has been done, we may have to do it manually, those enrichments in place. And once we do those custom related attributes, business rules, and classifications onto the client model, we would be in a position to generate the specifications document. What you see as the client model N is that after every patch or every upgrade or every release, you could go to generate the specification documents, and what we would do in our platform is to carry only the enhancements part. It would always compare it with the base version of your model and tell you what are all the changes which have occurred in each one of those releases, and therefore you would have the system in production from releases. Now we will go to a short walkthrough of the platform itself for you to see how it is getting generated. I'm not going to walk through the entire part of the platform. What we would go to see is the how to generate the specifications document. Here you would see a menu structure aligned to the banking model, which is very similar to what you would have had it in your system. Consumer loans others is where we generated the specification document, and what you see to your right is a set of business rules which have been selected for this particular product, and what you see on the left shows that there are other business rules which have been configured for this particular business group but which are not relevant for this particular product. At this time, the specification documents are generated outside the platform, and therefore I am going to show you how it gets generated. I have just triggered the specification generations. In a minute it should be there. Here it is. It has generated the specification document, which is the same as I showed you before. Now I will go to generate the parameter documentation which occurs at the business group level. Here it has generated. You would have the date stamping which shows at what time it has been generated, and the parameter document is the same as I showed you before. It's as simple as this to generate for the various documentation. We did make a beta run with some of the prospects during November, and we gathered a number of suggestions with regard to what we could do in this platform. One of them related to certain changes which they recommended to the specification document. Namely, initially we did not capture it for the inquiries part. Now we have an ability, we are working on it, and before March we would have incorporated some of these changes into our release schedules in terms of capturing for the inquiries. Similarly, errors being shown into that document. Also in terms of the certain components such as interest, fees, charges, alerts, as well as the batch processing impact being shown on the specification document. In terms of parameter documentation, there was suggestion that the comments relating to the routines could be incorporated, and also a placeholder where the comments have not been put currently in your T24 infrastructure, whether it could be incorporated into the platform. Second, many of them felt that these documents are static, and if we had turned it into an online help guide, it will become searchable, locatable. You could see impact of what the changes to be done to a particular parameter on the various entry screens, and therefore you would be able to close out on a number of issues together using this. So we are working to convert that into an online help guide. Similarly, at this point of time, the platform captures the system in production at varying points in time. The first time when we capture it for you, as well as after every patch or release, that we capture it to hold the various versions together. What it does not have for comparison is what is the future state actually desired in the functional specification document and what is actually available in the system in production. And therefore, we have incorporated the designer engine into the platform in order for you to define the specification at the same level of detailing that is provided here in these documents, which would or which should eliminate a lot of those dilution of those requirements or issues with regard to the development as well as testing. The engine also provides for comparison between two releases to give what has undergone change. This is particularly relevant when people are either upgrading or migrating into a different solution. It can provide what is there in the earlier release and what is there in the current release to indicate where those variations occur. We are also working towards creating a dashboard which gives release specific changes so that it can be submitted for your change management auditors. And we have a fixed schedule in the coming financial year to incorporate for turning the specifications into user acceptance tests design as well as execution. That execution will be facilitated both in the desktop as well as the browser versions of T24. Currently, there are a number of T24 users who are still on the desktop mode who haven't migrated to the browser versions, and there are no specific automation engines which could facilitate execution for them. If you have any new request, please feel free to share that on our website and we would incorporate them into our release schedule. Now, please have a look at our own website where you have a short video which carries the features of the platform as well as placeholders where you could sign up for a proof of concept. You could choose any two entry screens and we would go to generate those specifications with or without a connectivity. If you provide that connectivity to our offshore destination, then we could capture that using our own utility. In case at the proof of concept stage the connectivity is an issue, we would gather those two entry screens and we would create an utility and forward to you, which you could run in your T24 environment, create those output files and pass it on to us, which we would upload into our platform and go to generate with them. It is our promise that within 10 business days we would go to generate both the specification as well as the parameter documentation for you for those two entry screens, and it would not involve more than 10 hours of your teams, whether it be IT or business users. If you want to engage with us, please share your own comments as well as interest to join us in a live webinar. We'll be more than happy to accommodate you in our schedule. Thank you very much.